You can go ahead and start. They always roll in late, so they'll, they'll
Awesome.
be.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, it'll work.
Awesome. So, yeah, I don't know how much you guys know about vitamin D or melanin. I heard you were kind of talking about it a little bit, but I figure I'll do my best with kind of covering the basics and getting more sophisticated into it. So there's going to be a lot of information here that you maybe have never heard before. So don't try and memorize too much. Just kind of sit back. I'll do the best I can to generalize a lot of this and break it down. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to speak up. Okay, so basically here I met your teacher. Oh, what was that, about 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I think.
Three.
During a 100-mile race, him and I both did. So I thought this was just a cool photo here with that beard that's all frosted over. Yeah, so a little bit about myself. I'm currently in chiropractic school up at Northwestern Health and Sciences University. So I'm in Minneapolis currently. I'm in my currently the 7th year of school, 4 years of undergrad plus 3 years of chiropractic school. I have about one more trimester left until I can have my doctorate of chiropractic. So it's a small school up in Minneapolis. That my school has traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, massage therapy, and chiropractic. So it's a pretty interesting school. A lot of different ideas get passed back and forth. So if you have a chance to look it up sometime, feel free. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Also, if you guys are interested, I have a podcast called the Die Healthier Podcast. I had your teacher on it about 2 years ago, and we had a good conversation. So basically on the podcast, I just talked to different doctors, scientists about just different ideas, a lot about strength and conditioning as well. Okay, but let's get into this. Let's get into the fun stuff now. Okay, so let's start off with melanin here. Melanin is quite an interesting little molecule, if you want to say. There's a lot of stuff it does. I mean, the most common one that I'm sure we all know is that what determines our skin color, the amount of melanin that's in it. So that's kind of one of the basic things that melanin does. It basically produces color. That's the most simplistic way to say it, but there is a lot more that's going on with melanin in the body. But first, let's kind of look into a little more about how does melanin get produced. So there's a hormone here called melanocyte stimulating hormone right here. So it comes from this little structure in the brain called the pituitary gland. It sits about 2 centimeters from your eyeball, and it's kind of what determines a lot of the hormones that get released in the body. You see hormones like ADH that works on the kidneys, the ovaries, the testes, the thyroid, the muscle, the bone, the adrenals. There's a lot of different functions that the pituitary gland have, including melanocyte stimulating hormone. So it's going to tell the skin when to produce more pigment. So an interesting thing about the pituitary gland is that it gets a lot of stimulus from the eyes. So the eyes are basically going to tell the pituitary gland when we need more pigment. So if your eyes are detecting a lot of sunlight, that might be a stimulus to send out melanocyte stimulating hormone into the skin to produce more pigment. So this is a pretty big concept here that obviously it's in the middle of the day, you're outside and the sun is bright, that's going to be a stimulus. So basically that is also going to be a stimulus to all these other hormones you have here, growth hormone, thyroid hormone, and some of these others. So this is kind of really going to tell the body how to function and what to do. Okay, so let's go deeper into this melanocyte stimulating hormone. So there's a bunch of different types of this hormone. You have an alpha, you have a beta, and a gamma melanocyte stimulating hormone. But let's focus on alpha. What is alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone? What does it all do? Well, that's going to be the big one that deals with pigment. But there's other important features of this hormone. It's also going to have a factor with various other things like eating disorders and energy homeostasis. That it really gets as complex as kind of looking at potentially addiction. So this hormone right here looks at alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone and this molecule called POMC. So up in the Stanford in California in the addiction area of the school, they've been really trying to study this POMC quite a bit. So they found that this hormone that stimulates pigment also has an effect on POMC. They're starting to see that POMC has a play or a factor in addiction. And this POMC is found in the eye. So this could be kind of why we enjoy sunrises, we enjoy sunsets. It's kind of what these researchers are starting to think. It's really interesting. And I think it's going to have a huge effect in the future when researchers study addiction. But this is just kind of showing how melanin is really much more than just pigment. It has a lot of different roles in the body, which kind of makes it complicated to try and understand. But let's go deeper in. What is melanin and where is it found? Okay, so melanin right here, it is made from L-dopa and tyrosine. Okay, so a little bit about these two. L-dopa is a precursor to dopamine, and tyrosine produces dopamine. Okay, so dopamine in the brain here. Okay, a little side story here with the brain. So in chiropractic school, I got the opportunity to dissect cadavers. So actual humans, we got to go into the brain and look at different angles, slice it up, and look at the different parts of the brain. And one interesting area of this is what's called the substantia nigra, right here. So it's a lower area of the brain where it's pigmented. It's dark in color. And this is the area of the brain that's important of producing dopamine. Okay, so dopamine, what does dopamine do? Dopamine is gonna that's what motivates us to move. So that's kind of the urge or the excitement that you get about something. You want to go do something. You want to go to that party. You want to go on a date. You can't wait for the big game. That's dopamine. Kind of a few diseases you can associate with dopamine is Parkinson's. Parkinson's is kind of a motor disease, a motor disorder that you can't really stop movement. You're always going to have a fidget or your gait is going to be messed up. It's a really bad disease that's all about the disturbance in dopamine. So you see here, dopamine is made from tyrosine and L-dopa. So, but L-dopa and tyrosine also make melanin, which kind of makes sense that we see melanin in this area of the brain that produces dopamine. So another interesting thing about this tyrosine. So let's go a little bit into chemistry. There is a group, if you look at the proteins, more specifically the amino acids, you have amino acids like tryptophan and tyrosine. These are the aromatic amino acids. So trying to simplify this, the aromatic amino acids, they need sunlight to work. They're a fancy molecule that has a benzene structure that captures sunlight. Okay, what does that mean? That means tyrosine and tryptophan need sunlight in order to work. So if you look at melanin, melanin made of tyrosine, melanin captures sunlight in the skin. It starts to make sense here that this is kind of all these little systems are connected in one way or another. So kind of going down here, you have melanin and sunlight. Okay, so melanin absorbs sunlight between 290 and 320 nanometers, which corresponds with UV light, UVB more specifically. So that's kind of going to be the sunlight that gives you sunburns, but also the type of sunlight that's going to be making vitamin D. So melanin really does its best job when it's absorbing UV light to help make vitamin D, but also we see how there's other melanin structures in the brain and other areas of the body that are maybe not exposed to sunlight, but they're darker, have a darker pigmentation to them. So, I mean, when you just start thinking about melanin, it really confuses you to a degree how it has so many different roles in the body, from sunlight to addiction to vitamin D. So kind of going with this, I came across this article here a few, I say about a year ago, that looked at turtles. How can a turtle survive all winter buried underwater? It didn't make any sense. How could this turtle survive? Well, they looked at this, and in the study here, they looked at how, okay, so the turtle is able to withstand not having any oxygen. How were they able to do that? Well, and they found, if you see on the turtle shell, it was loaded with melanin, all kinds of it here. All this melanin, that's what gives its nice color to the shell. And they found the melanin helped the turtle survive throughout the winter. So it was able to combat low energy levels, hypoxia, which is another term for low oxygen, using melanin. So this fascinated me. I'm like, okay, does melanin can it do the same thing in humans? So I found this study right here, the role of human photosynthesis in predictive, preventative, and personalized medicine. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Melanin, it kind of acts like chlorophyll. So if you look at chlorophyll in plants, it takes water and it breaks it down into hydrogen and oxygen. That's the role of chlorophyll. So I don't know how much chemistry knowledge you guys have here, but this little arrow right here means this process is irreversible. It cannot go the other way. It cannot combine hydrogen and oxygen to make water. It can only go in one direction. That's what chlorophyll does. Okay, melanin had a similar role, but there's a big difference. If you look down here, this is what melanin kind of does. It's reversible. That means melanin has the ability to take water and break it down just like a plant does, but it can also go the other direction. It can take this oxygen and hydrogen and make water. So essentially, humans, to a degree, are houseplants. We can make water or break water down. We have the ability to dissociate water, is what the fancy term is. So that is pretty big when you start looking at here in the brain. Is this a possibility why we have melanin in the brain? Is the ability to break down water. Okay, so why is this big? Well, right here, you see these electrons right here. So when we break down water, when melanin breaks down water, it can send these to make energy in the mitochondria through the electron transport chain. So we have the ability to make energy from water. That is huge. That means we don't need to consume all of our energy from eating food. By having melanin, getting in the sun to produce more melanin, we have a capability to make more energy. So my favorite story is these Tibet monks. There's stories that these monks would go to top of mountains for a whole year and not eat anything. And I've always wondered, how are they able to do this? Now, these are just kind of stories, but it can kind of make sense in a bit when you look at melanin with how they can produce energy from water. So this has pretty big impacts in terms of diseases. So if you look at Alzheimer's right here, it's a terrible, terrible disease. The brain accumulates a lot of these plaques, all these amyloids, and it's destructive. Probably one of the worst diseases a person can have. Well, they're starting to find melanin can have an impact in Alzheimer's, which is interesting. Kind of going back to the substantia nigra with how there's melanin, is there a potential role? And this is kind of what this study from the Journal of Neuroscience and Medicine looked at. Down here below, you see these hands. These hands are from a person that has Cushing's disease. Okay, so Cushing disease is kind of a malfunction of the adrenal cortex, what makes our stress hormones. One of the stress hormones in particular is cortisol. So going back here, cortisol is made from a hormone that's released in that pituitary gland. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, right here, ACTH, adrenal cortex, cortisol. And Cushing's disease is a malfunction in this. Well, you see with this person's hands, a hallmark of this disease is darkening. You see how the knuckles getting darker, kind of a bronzing of the skin. So we have a lot of melanin that's being produced in this individual. So if you start looking at melanin, it has an impact in a lot of diseases. So it's kind of interesting. Melanin is much, much more than just making pigmentation. It has a huge role in disease, which could be accomplished from basically its capability to break apart water to make energy. Okay, so there's another little molecule here I want to talk about, melanopsin, kind of similar to melanin in a way. Melanopsin here. So let's see, if you look in the eye, you have what's called rods and cones. And there's a third neuron that's melanopsin. So rods and cones are what helps you distinguish light and shape. It's what helps you see. But melanopsin is another neuron that scientists recently discovered, like pretty recently, that they never knew about. So what does melanopsin do here? It's kind of, I want to say, to describe it, your circadian rhythm, you're waking, you're sleeping. It has a huge impact on that through melanopsin. Okay, so let's look at an X-ray here. Right here, you have the eyes, you have the hard palate right here. But if you look right here, this is where that pituitary gland sits. That pituitary gland is what houses your hormones that we talked about. It's what helps make melanin and cortisol. So there's a pathway here that connects your eyes to the pituitary gland. There's actually this little molecule involved in this little nucleus center called the suprachiasmatic nucleus as well. Okay, so right here, SCN, suprachiasmatic nucleus. Okay, so melanopsin, it's in the eye, it's going to go to this nucleus and talk to that pituitary gland. And that pituitary gland then is going to dictate a lot of our circadian rhythms. So how you wake up, when you go to bed, how tired you are during the day, that is all kind of going to be dictated by melanopsin. If you think about melanin as well, there's a lot of melanin in the eye, so it kind of makes sense here why there's a molecule melanopsin. Melanin detects sunlight, so does melanopsin. If you look here, 480 through 500 nanometers is what's going to activate melanopsin, which is blue light. So blue light you're going to see during the day when the sun is up. So it's going to tell the brain, hey, it's daytime, time to be active, release a lot of hormones that help me stay awake. And that is what's going to help the body maintain a circadian rhythm, being able to stay awake and go to bed when you want to, wake up when you want to. So I don't want to get too much into circadian rhythm because it's a huge concept. But if you want to learn more about it, look into the work of Samer, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this name right, Hattar. He's a scientist that does a lot of work in understanding circadian rhythm. So there's a few other things that melanopsin is going to work on as well. And it's called the pupillary reflex. Okay, so I'm going to describe the pupillary reflex here. Let me stop recording and show you my eye here. Okay, so the pupillary reflex, the pupillary reflex is going to determine your pupil. Basically, is your pupil open or it's shut? So kind of zooming in here on my eye. Hopefully you guys can see it here. But you have the little black part in the middle of the eye. So how a doctor measures his pupillary reflex is with a flashlight. So I'm going to do the best I can so you guys can see this. If you look at my eye, my pupil, and I'm going to shine a light, can you guys kind of see how my pupil gets larger and it gets smaller with a light stimulus? So,
Yeah,
perfect. So this pupillary reflex is pretty big. It's going to tell the doctor a lot of information. And this is kind of going to be ran by melanopsin. So as a chiropractor, I have the capability of figuring out when someone has a neurological disorder going on. And one way I do that is by measuring this pupillary reflex right here. Right here, which is ran by melanopsin. So one last point I want to make here with melanopsin is how does someone that's blind know when it's day and when it's night? Well, they found this out through melanopsin. Even though you're blind, your rods and your cones don't work, but you still have that melanopsin. So they still know when it's time to go to bed and it's time to wake up. So people that lack vision can still tell what time of day it is. So a lot of this, at first, when someone was blind, a lot of doctors would take the eye out and put in a fake eye right away, both eyes. But they started finding out that when they did this really messed the person up quite a bit. They gained a lot of weight, they couldn't go to sleep, a lot of metabolic issues, and then they discovered melanopsin. So this is a pretty big player of how someone that loses their vision can still have relatively normal health. They aren't going to have problems. Okay, so one last point here with melanopsin I want to make. There's an app here called Light Meter. So I don't know if you guys talked about Light Meter or not yet, But
No.
this this is a app you can download on your phone that detects how much light is in your environment. So you download it and you can check it. So you look up here at the upper left and light meter, you see 327. So that is, I measured this inside through artificial light. I turned on the light and I pointed my phone to the light, and 327 lux, a measurement of light, is what it produced. Okay, down here, 2,243, that is what I measured through a window at the sun. So much, much, much higher. And then you see 6,028, that I went outside and pointed it directly to the sun. So, which shows here, if you want to regulate melanopsin and regulate your circadian rhythm, the best way to do this is through sunlight. Your eye is going to get the most information through melanopsin, telling the brain what time of day it is through light by going outside. So I always recommend to people, as soon as you wake up in the morning, look at the sun, go outside. Okay. So kind of the big one here I want to talk about with you is vitamin D.
Hold on a second, Scott.
Yep.
Okay, so go back to your blue light slide, 2 slides.
Yep.
Most of the kids in this class weren't in environmental science class, but in environmental science, we talked about blue light. And a lot of you have experience with this because you have blue light glasses. I know there's at least one of you in this room that has. So you've got blue light reducing glasses that you wear. And so a lot of research and stuff is coming out right now that says you need to restrict that amount of blue light so that way your circadian rhythm doesn't get messed up. That's why you're not supposed to look at your phone after like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. That's why your parents should arguably make you put your phone away. It's why when I go to bed at night, if I lay in my bed and stare at my phone, it's why I can't fall asleep. It's because that blue light is literally stimulating my body and saying, oh, it's time to be alert. So there's a lot of connections and stuff going on here. Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Like right here, I got my blue light blockers on. That, like, your teacher's absolutely correct on everything he said about blue light. Now, it's not blue light is dangerous. It's the time of the day that you receive blue light. So during the day, you want blue light. You want all the blue light. That's the majority of the sunlight is blue light. But like you said, when it's dark, when it's nighttime, if you keep looking at blue light, basically that's a signal to the brain to release cortisol, release stress, and keep you awake. So it makes sense, like just like you were saying, if you're looking at your phone at dark, that's a stimulus to your brain. Stay awake, which sometimes I use that to my advantage. If you have to stay up late at night, I get in a very light environment. When I run ultra marathons and I have to be awake at night, I look at very, very bright light to keep me awake. But it's not the most healthy. So when I have to study late at night, that's why I get some blue light blockers to kind of help me go to sleep. So very critical point, very important point.
The other weird part that some of the kids will connect with is chickens. Because in the wintertime, you have to turn a light on for your chickens, otherwise they stop laying eggs. And I'm assuming it's because of the same reason. I know it's because of a hormone produced from the eye, so it makes sense if that was the melanopsin or something similar to that. I don't know if you know that or not, Scott, but I know from my experience having chickens, and some of you do too, you got to turn the light on when it later in the season, otherwise they stop laying eggs. So that would make sense. It's similar hormone production process there.
Oh, absolutely. It's actually an interesting book here. I'm trying to think what the name of it is. but there's this guy that would take a lot of photographs of plants and animals many times throughout the day. And he started finding out you can totally manipulate an animal or a plant based off of what light it's getting. So, like farmers, obviously, they don't have a PhD and they're not a doctor, but they figured out this information through observing that you can produce more eggs with light, or you can manipulate reproductive cycles with light. So this is awesome information. That's kind of how they get flowers for Easter. The people that grow the flowers know, hey, let's expose different lights to them at different times of day so they bloom on Easter Day, um, which is awesome. But on the same side, what are we doing by looking at our phone past dark? Are we manipulating different processes in the body? Are we changing reproductive cycles? Are we changing things around? Is it better or is it not? Well, I would argue that it's not entirely beneficial to us. So it just, the light is so powerful to the eye that Mother Nature already figured it out when we need light and when we don't. So by manipulating it, at what cost is that coming? Other than giving us more eggs, which I fully approve of. Is any more questions to blue light?
Cool. I think we're good.
Awesome. Let's see, how much more time do we have here?
Like 10 minutes, 9 minutes.
Perfect. Let's get through. Let's go through vitamin D. So vitamin D here, it's kind of argued that vitamin D is more of a hormone than it is a vitamin. That it has the ability to influence genetic expression, go into the nuclear membrane of the cell, which is not something a vitamin should be able to do. So some people are like, vitamin D, it's a hormone, not a vitamin. So kind of looking at here with vitamin D, there's a few ways you can get it. You can get through sunlight or from food. From animal products, you get D3, which is the most useful form in the body. And D2, that's the form you're going to get from vitamin D milk, plants, mushrooms. And it doesn't work as well in the human body as D3 does. Okay, so you have sunlight hitting the skin, going through melanin. It is going to go to the liver right here. It needs cholesterol to work, to keep converting into usable form in the body, which is in blood. And then ultimately, it goes to the kidneys to make the active form of vitamin D. So a lot of processes here involved. You have to use the liver and the kidneys to make a useful form of vitamin D that the body can use. Okay, so a few things here to look at. Let's look at the bottom study right away. So this study looked at pigs. So they took pigs and raised them outside, and they took other pigs and raised them inside, and they found the pigs that are raised outside had more vitamin D in their body, in the meat that the humans consume. Makes sense. Right here also, so this study kind of looked at what is the best way to get vitamin D? Is it through the sun or is it through a supplement? And they kind of found, hey, vitamin D obtained from the sun is much, much better than through a supplement. So hence why I always say, get your vitamin D from the sun and not a supplement. So here's a few different ways you can get vitamin D. You have what's called a vitamin D lamp right here. So for some of you that, I think Missouri, you don't get vitamin D right now because the sun is too low. This is one strategy you can use, is a vitamin D lamp. Another strategy is to eat cold water fish. So what's interesting is Mother Nature already figured out that the further north you go, the less vitamin D you get from the sun. And there's a compensation how cold water fish contain more vitamin D than warm water fish. Hence why you should eat more fish in the wintertime for health. Another way is a vitamin D supplement right here. And most importantly, sunshine to get vitamin D. And you guys went through the D-Minder app, so you kind of already understand knowing when do we get vitamin D from the sun and when we don't. So what is vitamin D doing in the body? So the most important function here is with calcium and phosphorus. Calcium phosphorus here is going to be huge in obtaining bone and calcium. So the heart cannot pump if you don't have calcium. That's a big thing that doctors measure on blood tests is calcium levels. That if you don't have calcium, your muscles don't work and you can die. So this is a very critical thing that vitamin D plays a role in, is making sure you always have calcium available. Another thing is an immune function. So we're kind of seeing this quite a bit with how in the wintertime, people are more prone to getting sick. So vitamin D, it plays a huge role in the immune system through the function of dendritic cells and T cells. It kind of really helps the immune system function. It helps the body distinguish what's a threat and what it needs to attack. Number 3 here, it inhibits renin in the kidneys. So renin is responsible for raising blood pressure in someone. And vitamin D works in contrast. It's going to inhibit renin, which indirectly lowers blood pressure, which is fascinating. It can help your heart that way. And the 4th is genetic expression. So something big here is 5 to 8% of our DNA is actually from viruses. So if some of your DNA is being expressed that is a viral origin, then that's kind of a theory that a lot of scientists have behind cancer and MS, is that maybe the wrong DNA is being expressed in a simplistic way of saying. So vitamin D is going to ensure that the correct DNA is being expressed. So a lot of huge functions here with vitamin D. Some of the issues we see with people that have too low of vitamin D, you have rickets, which makes your bones weak. You have low calcium, you can get seizures, muscle issues, osteoporosis, which is your bones are breaking down. You can get cancer. So there's a lot of things that having too low of vitamin D is going to do to you. Also at the bottom of the list, multiple sclerosis. So very important hormone that vitamin D is. Okay, so I got to talk about this. Does the sunlight cause skin cancer? And the answer to it is yes. Yes, it does. It does cause skin cancer. But to say sunlight is correlated to skin cancer. Sunlight doesn't directly cause skin cancer. Cancer is very sophisticated. There's a lot of things that contribute to cancer. So saying something as simple as does something cause cancer is kind of immature and not completely correct. There's many, many variables. Okay, so going here, looking at sunlight and skin cancer. Should you avoid the sun to avoid getting skin cancer? Well, look at here. This is the top 10 cancers in Nebraska. Okay, looking right here to the left here, you have lung, which is number 1. You have colon cancer, pancreas, breast, prostate, leukemia, non-Hodgkin's, brain, esophagus, kidney. These are the top 10 cancers that are killing people in Nebraska. You don't see skin cancer anywhere on this list. So that means skin cancer has a very low mortality rate in Nebraska, but there's other cancers that have a much, much, much higher risk of mortality. So can vitamin D impact any of these? And the answer is yes, it does. Okay, so looking here, so this study here looked at vitamin D deficiency with breast cancer and colon cancer. And they kind of found that the more vitamin D someone has, the lower chance of cancer. So more vitamin D is going to lower your risk of all these, but it might cause a little higher risk of skin cancer. So a few things here, last slide here. How can you prevent skin cancer? Because obviously you don't want to get too much sun because that can increase skin cancer, but you want to get enough sun where you prevent some of these cancers. Obviously you have the D-Minder app. I'm gonna look here, sunscreen. I recommend sunscreen that's zinc oxide in it. That is a much more beneficial to the body than some of these other sunscreens that have a lot other chemicals in it. Zinc oxide is much, much more effective at preventing skin damage. So get sunscreen that has zinc oxide in it. And a few other things, omega-3s and omega-6s. So quickly here, omega-6s are what causes inflammation in the body through arachidonic acid. Omega-3 is going to prevent inflammation in the body. So trying to limit your omega-6 consumption and rising your omega-3 consumption. So get more omega-3s to prevent skin damage. Omega-3s, you look at avocados, salmon, nuts, things like that. So less omega-6s, more omega-3s, use the D-Minder app and use zinc oxide, and that's going to lower your risk of skin cancer the most. So that's kind of, that's kind of everything I have for you guys for today on vitamin D and melanin. I kind of had to speed through vitamin D a little bit here, but it's very critical, very important to understand what does melanin do and what does vitamin D do. So with kind of concluding there, is there any questions that anyone has?
So a couple things to point out. First off, you said earlier that cold water fish is a good source of vitamin D. That would include salmon, right? So yep. That would be your omega-3s you're supposed to be getting anyway. So like, are avocados high in vitamin D?
No, there might be a little bit in it, but you're not going to get a significant amount. The foods to consume that are high in vitamin D for plants, you got mushrooms. You're just really not getting much vitamin D from plants, quite as much as with fish like cod, salmon. Actually, cod liver oil is a great supplement that they used to give to kids back in the 1800s who had rickets, which is low vitamin D. So you're just going to get a lot more vitamin D from non-plant sources because it's D3.
So I know you were doing this a while ago. Are you still doing your liver supplements?
Once a month, I eat liver. I do. Because it contains so much vitamins in it.
Wasn't there a strange were you doing raw liver or was that someone else?
I know a few people that they cut up liver and they put it in itty bitty chunks and then they freeze it. And so then each day they just pop the frozen chunk of liver like it's a pill. I don't know. It still tastes like liver. Liver isn't good. It tastes bad. But I consume it because there's a lot of vitamins in it, a lot of nutrients, very, very powerful. The other thing is liver has a lot of vitamin A in it. Vitamin A is critical for vitamin D to work in the body. Those two vitamins dance together. So you're going to be low in vitamin D if you're low in vitamin A. So you can indirectly rise vitamin D by eating more vitamin A sources. So
last question for you here. How long is it going to take you to run 100 miles on Saturday?
Oh, I actually had to drop out of it. Because I got a 200-mile race coming up in a few months, and I got a knee injury that I'm battling yet. That I can still run, but running 100 miles is gonna knock me out a little bit more. So I just didn't think it was as beneficial to run this Saturday. It kills me having to drop out, but for the sake of being able to run 200 miles this June, I had to drop out. Aren't you doing the half marathon this Saturday?
Yeah, I'm doing the half, and then I'm supposed to pace somebody on the 100, but I don't know how well that's going to work out. So, you guys have any other questions for Scott? So, just to recap, you are 4 years undergrad, 3 years into graduate school, chiropractic school. You've got, you said, a trimester left. So, you're looking at graduating in the summer?
Yep, this May I'm gonna be graduating chiropractic school up in Minnesota. If anyone's interested in chiropractic and learning more about it, you feel free to reach out to me and I can guide you to the appropriate places or help you learn more. But basically, yeah, any questions, feel free to reach out.
Cool. Well, thanks for talking to us, man. We're going to go to lunch, so we appreciate it.
You guys have a good day.